Hello and welcome to Addis Matters, our show on Ethiopian current affairs with me, Begna, Simesso. According to the Julian calendar, which Ethiopia officially follows, we are entering year 2013. Happy Ethiopian New Year to all Ethiopians celebrating it at home and abroad. One of the main agendas Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed brought to the front is the liberalization of economic approach and privatization of key state-owned enterprises. A number of state-owned companies are up for partial and full privatization. Ethiopia Telecom, Ethiopian Airlines, Ethiopian Railway Corporation, Ethiopian Sugar Corporations, to name a few. Today we'll focus on the liberalization and privatization process of Ethiopia Telecom. I have two distinguished guests, Yilkal Abate, Vice President of the ICT Association of Ethiopia, and Biruk Moges, CEO of G2G ICT Group. Thank you both for your time, views, and insight, and welcome to the show. Before diving deep into the discussion of the telecom liberalization and privatization process, as way of introduction, can you tell us what you guys are doing? You are industry insiders in telecom, and you can briefly tell us what your company is doing. Yilkal, you can tell us what the association is doing.
Thank you, Begna. STT is an association of private tech companies. Its goal is generally to expose, engage, and enable the private sector in the IT industry. It's been in operation for about 7-8 years, since around 2010. And it has a number of services and facilitations that it provides, including a public-private forum, expo and conferences that expose Ethiopia's tech industry to outsiders, and also the other way around, possibly. Research and policy proposals for the sector or subsector. It also helps competition, startup-related activities, and digital education-related activities, including internship support, and generally supports the private sector in the tech industry.
Okay. How big is the association? Do you have lots of members?
Yes. It has now about 100 companies in it.
100 companies?
Yeah, and on the mailing list there are more than 3,500
individual members.
Individuals and, professionals and companies.
Okay, great. Biruk, G2G IT Group. Tell us briefly what you guys are doing.
First, thank you for inviting me, Begna. I appreciate this. So G2G IT Group has focused on the ICT market for the last 4 years. We're also a member of the association as well. We took the ICT market and sort of broke it down to about 4 different verticals or sectors. We focus on telecom, we focus on IT solutions for enterprises, we focus on transport and logistics services, as well as IT security. So we tend to focus on this. We were fortunate enough about a few years ago to be one of the first private companies to provide broadband services for the commercial and the residential sector, and that's what we're largely known for, but that's not the only thing we do. So we understand this, at least we hope that we understand the topic in terms of privatization and liberalization as a private company that participated in providing broadband service. This was, I think, one of the things that we pushed on from early stage about allowing private companies to participate in delivering service for the community and for the nation.
So let's jump to it. Privatization. I mean, lots of questions have been being raised in the last, I don't know, a year or 6 months or so. One of the major issues that has been raised by lots of people is why is the government selling Ethiopia Telecom, partially or whatever way. The reason for that is there is a sort of myth in this country that the telecom sector is like a cash cow, and I remember Prime Minister Haile Desalegn once said Ethiopia Telecom is basically a cash cow and there is no way that we will sell it. And the recent financial report seems to support this claim. The company has made about 1.3 billion USD in revenue this year. Why do you think it's up for sale?
Okay, well, to my understanding, there's two parallel things happening, I think, in the telecom sector. One is the liberalization, which is the introduction of additional operators in addition to Ethiopia Telecom into the market. Yeah. And the other part is, as you said, the privatization part that the government announced, partial privatization of Ethiopia Telecom. As you indicated, I mean, there are varying opinions about whether it's a good thing to do the privatization or the liberalization, or how to sequence it for that matter. My personal view is I think having competition in the market is a very good thing for the tech industry, for other industries that consume technology and telecom services, for entrepreneurship and creativity and innovation, as well as also, of course, for revenue, government revenue from the sector. You can compare countries who have multiple operators competing generally tend to have a bigger telecom sector, even in the African context. So having competition, we have seen also support, innovation and service quality improvement, even in the banking sector, even though the competition is restricted for Ethiopians only in the banking sector. Now coming to the privatization and part of telecom, I think there are many things that should be weighed while doing it, including, for example, what are the goals you have for the telecom sector? Is it to generate enough forex? Is it to catalyze innovation and competition and improve quality of service? Is it also to upgrade the reach of the telecom services to the region? So you have to balance all of this out. And in my view, I think the fact that the liberalization happens earlier than the privatization allows for learning from the new entrants, for the existing operator and also for the regulators and policymakers, because the institutions that would purchase a stake in the partial privatization are very sophisticated investors. They have international experience, and we as a country need to make sure we extract the right value for whatever stake that we're selling.
You've mentioned forex, Biruk. The rationale, I mean, one of the criticisms or the ideas that has been brought forward was the Ethiopian government is privatizing the state-owned big enterprises because of prescription from the IMF and the World Bank, and other people say it's just to boost the foreign currency reserve. There is also another argument too, is the debt burden. We know Ethiopia Telecom, for instance, is in debt of more than $3 billion only from the Chinese Exim Bank. What do you think is the rationale? Why is the government doing this? I mean, as Yilkal mentioned there could be lots of benefits we could get it out of it. I mean, the competition, service improvement and the like, but the rationale, because that seems to be still a controversial issue.
So I think different people, different entities may say different things. I think what we need to look at is what is the biggest thing that we can achieve from it, right? So what is the long-term gain? I think when you look to find that answer, you'll find out that service and the economy is really where the answer is to that question. And what I mean by that is foreign currency, debt, and all of that. I think you'll have a short-term gain from privatizing, from selling, and you'll get some cash from it. But that's not the end goal, right? The end goal is that how do we sort of leapfrog into the future, right? So in some capacity or in some regards, when you look at Ethiopia Telecom in terms of the service that it provides, in some ways it's 20 or 30 years behind, right? So which means then that has a direct impact on the market, has a direct impact on innovation and all those things, technology and so on and so forth. So when you want to, sort of bring the country to where the rest of the world is at in terms of technology and service and things like that, then you can't do it without privatization. You can't do it without liberalization. So I think the answer is where do you want the economy to be, right? So if you want the economy to grow, we know where it has grown so far in terms of technology and service so far. You want to, sort of catapult that into the next gear, the next stage. And to do that, there is no way that you can do it. If there was a way, I think we would have done it, right? So by closing your borders, by closing everything off, you just cannot be where the rest of the world is at in terms of this. So I think the answer is, the rationale behind it is that you want to be, you want to innovate, you want to provide service to the people, and you want to reach as many people as you can with technology. So, and the only way to do that is to, so I think the debate is rightly so, or where it needs to be, is how to do it rightly, right? So how to do it in the right way. But I don't think there's a question in terms of allowing the private sector, that would bring innovation, that would bring efficiency, and all those things that can be gained from a private sector, a healthy private sector running the telecom industry.
Begna, if I may, I would like to add a caveat before you move to another question.
Okay.
Generally, I think when there's good regulatory ability, that the private sector drives the tech industry, including telecom. But it's not necessarily true, and that's where I slightly may differ from Brooks' view, that the fact only private sector owns a specific entity, a telecom operator, makes it by default more competitive or more technology advanced or more able to service needs. Because there are examples of both. There are examples of privately owned telecom operators doing very good work and providing fantastic services. And in several countries, it may not be obvious, there are also publicly owned telecom operators that are also competing globally at tier 1 level, if I may. The likes of Orange, Ethiopia Telecom, China Telecom, and so on. Most of them are not Telecom, British Telecom, including BT, are state-owned or largely state-owned. But it's the structure of the markets and the regulatory environment there, and I think that drives how they innovate. And I think it should not be lost that the value that should be captured from the sector should cascade to the general public. And if you're not paying good attention, you will privatize it, but the benefits will be extracted only to the private owners, not the large public.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the major issue probably, that has been raised repeatedly by some, is foreign currency, money. The Ministry of Finance is involved in this. It's a facilitator, and lots of people ask that, why is the Ministry of Finance involved in it? If my memory serves me well, there is an agency, a government agency called the Ethiopian Privatization Agency, which used to facilitate privatization of state-owned enterprises to to private owners. But when it comes to Ethiopia Telecom and probably for the others and the lineup, the Ministry of Finance is highly involved in it, and it makes us think that the government's immediate and major agenda is probably raising some money. But as you rightly said, private doesn't necessarily mean more creativity, more innovation, right? If I get your point.
Yes, I mean, generally, there is more proclivity to innovate because there is competition, but there are countries who have more than one private telecom operators that have higher prices than Ethiopia, for example, in terms of the absolute value you pay for service. But there's different structures and reasons. I'm not generalizing, but I think you need to look at each of the markets and the rationale objectively, not paint a...
If I could just add a little bit to that.
Yeah.
For me, what I look at is sort of the whole picture, right? So when you look at this conversation debate about private versus public and all has been going on not just here but everywhere, right? But the examples that we have in terms of successful nations or companies, there's more of private than public, right? Because it's a little bit difficult to get public right. If you get public right, it's great, right? In theory, but for the most part, public or government-run, state-owned agencies tend to be inefficient, and I think that's where it is where and how can you reach efficiency, the best way? And a lot more examples are there of private sector and private companies than there are of like the BTs and whatnot, which may be limited. And I think nobody would hate to get what is in theory right, which is public benefits the public obviously, but will it be run the right way? And if there's a huge probability that it will not, then where you kind of lean towards is the private sector. So that's one. The other thing, as far as the Ministry of Finance, running it, I don't know what the problem is in terms of that, because.
But there is another government body mandated to do privatization.
And that's fine, right? And maybe in the past that may have been what it was, but what I do know in private companies and ventures is that finance plays a huge role, right? So if you're looking at mergers and ventures and things like that, finance has a huge role. But remember, the Ministry of Finance is not doing this alone, right? So they're leading the committee, but the committee is comprised of many stakeholders that we can get into specifics if we have to. So it's not just them alone. It's all together. So there's a proper structure for it. If they're smart, and if they do their finance valuation and all the things that go with finance the right way, then hopefully we'll be better off than maybe what the previous entity did.
Cool. The timing of it. That's the other major issue. I mean, lots of people raised it. Why is the Ethiopian Communication Authority putting the company up for sale while the world economy is affected by the global pandemic? That's one view. There is another view of the government's legitimacy itself, because this is considered to be a sort of transitionary government, a reformist government, which has extended its term by a constitutional review process. Is the timing right?
So I think I want to break down this timing question into two. And let's just start with the privatization side. Liberalization and privatization, obviously two different things. When you look at Ethiopia Telecom, and I sort of hinted on it earlier, it's way behind in terms of what it should be serving today, right? So when you look at timings, no, it should have been done a long time ago in terms of delivering the services that the people need. Had the services been delivered, had it been an operator where it met the need of the country to move it forward, then there would not be any need to privatize it, right? So from a timing standpoint, we're way behind. Technology that they use is 20, 30 years old in some form. There are some current things, but for the most part, it's old in its way, and I think that is what Ethiopia Telecom also has tried to do as much as they can with the new management coming in. They've done tremendous job in improving it, but they can only go so far, because to take the next step, they will need that large capital. They will need that huge investment to meet the need of where it should be in terms of service. So that's one. As far as the other side of timing is that for me it was about 2.5 years ago that it was stated that it was going to be liberalized, right? Asking the question of current global economic conditions doesn't really change what the initial intention is, which is to liberalize and which is to privatize. And that, I think, is what those that are experts in the field, especially the Ministry of Finance, to determine whether the privatization part of Ethiopia Telecom should happen now or should be delayed. As a citizen, what my take is that I want the most that I can get out of the deal, right? So if it makes sense to sell it a little bit later, still sell it. The original idea is to still privatize. So long as that happens at the right timing, then I think everybody would be fine with that. As far as other operators coming in, again, market conditions will determine the timing of that. So
in short, it's too late already. Actually, that's what we're saying, basically.
It just needs to be done. And the question is when.
Since the Ethiopian Communication Authority made a call for expression of interest in June 2020, about 12 companies have responded so far. A consortium of telecom operators comprising Vodafone, Vodacom, and Safaricom, MTN, Orange, Saudi Telecom, Etisalat, Axian, Telecom South Africa, Liquid Telecom, and Snail Mobile. There are also two non-telecom companies, Kandu Global Telecommunications and Electromechanical International Projects. Can you comment briefly on some of these bidders, their experience, their reputation, what they can bring to this market?
Well, some have both wireless networks and landline operations. Some have only wireless operations. Some have more experience with emerging markets. Some have very good technological capability. So Ethiopia needs to put that into consideration. Also, in my view, Ethiopia needs this sector to support its development objectives and goals more significantly than you would perhaps require it in a more developed country. So that should be factored in terms of, I think, how they pick, not just how much money they get from the bidders, but other factors such as the track records, because if you look at each of them, some enter in some markets and then they quit quickly, or you need to ensure, for example, the promised investments happen. There are many factors that need to be looked at in the experience and the access they provide to other economies in the world that Ethiopia wants to connect and export to, and so on. So,
okay, Biruk, before jumping to this question, privatization, as Yilkal mentioned, is not new, even for Ethiopia. It's been tried in the 1990s, and actually, according to Slavam, a study in 2005, 362 state-owned enterprises are privatized between 1994 and 2004, generating 433 million USD, close to $500 million. Not a lot of money in today's measure. The privatization of the 90s and early 2000s is considered to be a failed project by many. Let me give you some examples. According to Gabello, a study in 2000, employment declined by 12%, production level declined by 14%, liquidity increased, technical efficiency decreased to 69% from 75% when enterprises were still under state ownership. The question is, why should we expect it will be different this time around, and what could make it different this time around?
So I think, sort of at a high level, the way I look at failure and success is that just because you failed once, it doesn't mean that you don't try. So for me, it's kind of I think Benjamin Franklin's a good example to where had he stopped on his first failure, then we wouldn't be where we are, right? So learning from failure, learning from the past. When you fail, getting up. I think that's what it's about, right? So the first question is that, is there a way? And I think the answer is very easy. Yes, there is a way. Were things done the wrong way in the past, and in the examples and the statistics you gave? Obviously, probably, right? But that doesn't mean you fear failure and you just stop, right? So I think for me is,
Let me rephrase it then. To make it better, to make it successful, what should be done now?
I think that's the better and the right question, right? So I think having a full and comprehensive plan, including an exit strategy, I think for me is important, because I am equally concerned, as Yilkal mentioned, where if these companies come and just leave or dump things and exit, that's also a problem, right? So I think a full comprehensive plan in terms of to start with knowing what you want to get out of it, and then sort of having a full roadmap to delivering that is very important. I have a concern in terms of making sure that the valuation, again, is going to be something that is worthwhile. I think it should lean towards more of a benefit for us than them. I don't want to sort of fall in this trap of, it's a win-win and all of that. No, I want to win more, right? So, because I want to look out for the nation. So I think siding as much of the benefit to our side than their side, I think is the right way to go. And obviously they will argue that too, and that's fine. That's, So, as I was saying, you try to think of things that could go wrong, things that could fail, early enough to where you can put it within the plan. So not just planning, for the success of it, but what if it fails? Then you could also have again a comprehensive plan when it comes to that. You can even change the model a little bit and say, instead of just fully right out selling the license to them, you could say it's a JV type of structure or a PPP type of structure, where it's a private-public partnership, where when they come in, they're not doing and running the company or running the operations or whatever it is by themselves, that they're doing this jointly in some shape or form. Again, I'm not an expert into the different structures, but however, if you do it jointly and there's something to get out of it jointly, it's not just them that's making money and having all the knowledge by themselves, that it is also the public's interest, or the state's interest in sharing the success. So I think it just goes back to plan to fail, failed plan, doing it the right way and making sure that you do it the right way. And I think if you can make that happen, and which is what everybody wants, then I don't see any reason why it should not succeed.
We should learn from previous mistakes, I guess. Up for sale is 40% of Ethiopia Telecom's stake, and it's been said that 2 companies will be granted license and 5% will be given to the public. There was a controversy in August. Some major media outlets reported that Ethiopia opted out of the privatization plan. I think there was a misunderstanding, and then the government clarified it. And now we're told services up for grab, not infrastructure. Why is that? Is that a good move?
I think that was always the part of the original plan, and it is an excellent move. I think it goes back and ties to the previous question. Which
Isn't infrastructure more expensive? I mean,
but infrastructure is something that can remain for us as a nation, right? So if we have the infrastructure and we can charge rent, right? So it goes back to that whole rent. You build a property and you rent it, and you keep getting revenue money on it every single month. So if the infrastructure is managed by us, the question is, will the quality be there? Will all of that? And if they can figure that out, then we as a nation are actually better off, owning the infrastructure, managing the infrastructure, and getting revenue out of it. And they can even put it within the plan to where those foreign companies, would have to pay in foreign currency, and then that even would be a long-term solution as opposed to a one-time purchase of a license. So I think, my opinion is that if the infrastructure can be done and they can lease dark fiber services and so on and so forth, that can stay for,
but is the infrastructure good enough that we have? I mean, Ethiopia Telecom built. I mean, there are.
Yeah, I think there's a rationale in that thought, and part of it is that infrastructure that already exists has money borrowed to do it. So it needs to be paid off. It needs more proactive and competent management, but I don't see a reason why that infrastructure can't be shared among different operators. This is exactly what happened when the UK, for example, started the liberalization route in the 90s. You know, many people would think their telecom sector was liberalized much earlier, but the first thing they did was BT was instructed to share its infrastructure to upcoming operators. You've lived there, so you probably have heard of it. So, like Biruk said, I mean, it would be a waste to throw away, you know, the investment you made in it in the existing infrastructure. And if you follow it properly, I think you can fix the reliability and other issues by changing specific parts of the infrastructure. So the reason I think is, one, the already invested money has to be paid off, and there may be other considerations in terms of security and so on also, potentially.
Good. We are approaching an end. Just before we conclude, though, I would like to ask you both on the digital transformation plan of 2025. Digital transformation needs of the country, and what should we expect out of the digital transformation plan of 2025? It's been publicized recently by the government, isn't it?
I think the answer, services, right? So
Services.
that's where, you know, as citizens, where we lack things, right? So, so the government taking major steps towards bringing services online is a big part of that plan. I think the most recent example that I can think of that I use is this ESW, or One Window. I don't know if you've heard of it, where a lot of the process, the bank foreign currency permitting process, the ERCA, the Revenue and Customs Authority process to you know, accept your goods from them, all that process is now online. And I've personally witnessed it to where it's made it so much more easier than the paper and bureaucratic process that it used to be. Not to say that all of the bureaucracy is eliminated, but if it can continue in the way that it started right now, where you can, from your permitting, you know, foreign currency permitting starting point to all the way to having your goods delivered and passed through customs and receive it, if all of that service happens online and there's more of it to come and as planned, I think you'll start seeing more efficiency, more goods and services being transacted, and there's a lot more things that the government has planned in terms of that. So I think it's one huge focus of it is service, making it easier for the public to receive service from the government. I'm sure you have more to say on that part.
I think it's also skills. You know, it's more and more the case that to participate in economic activity generally in any form in the world, you require more and more digital abilities. And I think that needs to be properly thought out and outlined, and there is an effort to do that in this digital transformation strategy. You know, 30, 40 years ago, Ethiopia had a reading and literacy
campaign.
And many people may not realize it, but it has such huge impact in people's ability to participate socially, economically, politically, because they can read and write, they can do arithmetic, and it had decades of impact, you know. All the people who migrated out of Ethiopia and back, they are a result of that period where there was a big push for literacy, right? I think Ethiopia needs now, or will need soon, similar digital literacy charter. You know, it should be something that everybody is entitled to access, and that will open the participation door. I think it's partly skills, like you said, it's services, other e-commerce, and areas of the economy that Ethiopia hasn't well extracted value from, such as tourism, mining, you know, IT-enabled agriculture or health and so on. So there's still a lot more, but it's a good starting point that needs to happen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both of you. Yilkal, just before letting you go, there is because you work, I mean, although you are here not representing Transient or Techno, you work, I know that you work with Techno, with your capacity at Transient. And recently Techno has been on the news reports for bad reasons, unfortunately. The reason that I'm asking that is, I want to relate that to the data mining issues that has been raised. On Techno W2 smartphone, sold in Ethiopia, Cameroon, Ghana, and South Africa, a pre-installed malware had been discovered. It's called Tridia malware. According to SecureD, an anti-fraud platform that conducted the research, 19.2 million suspicious transactions have been recorded in more than 200,000 devices. I think these are the kinds of things that put people on edge when it comes to foreign agents, especially the Chinese ones. We know of the Huawei saga in the US, for instance. You don't have necessarily to comment on this. I mean, if you know, you can tell us what has happened and how did it affect the Ethiopian market in particular.
Well, I don't have enough information except what I saw in the news, like you. And I think I'm not the appropriate person to comment. There is a specific, as a publicly listed company entity that should do it. But as a general comment, I mean, the threat of malware exists in every device, in any device, and can happen in any market. It may not be generally public, but if you go to the banks that use technology from elsewhere, you would find, many incidents of such. So it's better to ask, and I think also generally Ethiopia should navigate well this global competition between big powers, and that should also be factored into this.
Biruk, data is, there's, even on Monday during the meeting that was chaired by the Prime Minister, I heard the State Minister of Finance saying that data is the new gold, and inviting these foreign partners, foreign agents, the big conglomerates, telecom companies, data is going to be a huge asset, isn't it? And some people are raising an alarm about it, and how secure will the data be, and what kinds of precautions should, the privatization and both the liberalization process should take into consideration as a last remark.
So I think it should be looked at in twofold. One is how do we benefit from data as well, right? So I think I was mentioning it earlier, where if it can be in some sort of partnership, joint venture, where we participate in running things together, then we would also participate in getting revenue or even access to that data to use it the right way. So there's the business side of things and making sure that we're part of that revenue source stream as well. The other side is regulation, right? So how do we want to protect our people, our nation, and making sure that there's strong regulation in how data is being used, is being accessed, and having strict laws that would combat any misuse of that, and fining and all of that goes with it as well. So I think we can participate and partake in it, as well as also protect our people's data as well.
Thank you very much. We have to end now. Thank you for watching, and thank you both for your contribution. Yilkal Abate, Vice President of ICT Association of Ethiopia, and Biruk Moges, CEO of G2G ICT Group. Next time, we'll be back with another topics and another guests. Until then, goodbye from me, Begna, Simesso, and the team at Addis Matters, and happy Ethiopian New Year.